Good afternoon, colleagues. Just before we get underway, colleagues will be aware that there have been some issues with the Wi-Fi, corporate Wi-Fi within the Parliament. Efforts are ongoing to try and stabilise that. We will do what we can to get members who are joining remotely connected in and able to participate. I'd advise members who are in the chamber that if they plug in their devices, that should allow them to operate as normal. It's simply the Wi-Fi that is affected. But as I say, we're doing what we can to try and resolve the matter as soon as possible. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions. The first portfolio is Constitution, External Affairs, Culture and Parliamentary Business. Members wishing to ask a supplementary question should press the request to speak buttons during the relevant question. And I call question number 1, Ros McCall. Thank you.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to encourage library usage in the Mid-Scotland and Fife region.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Roberts.
Thank you very much to Ros McCall for her question. Public libraries are devolved to local authorities who have a statutory duty to secure the provision of adequate library facilities in their area. We encourage library usage through our support for the Scottish Library and Information Council, and this includes £450,000 for the Public Library Improvement Fund and supports creative, sustainable and innovative public library projects throughout Scotland, and is on top of our general revenue funding to local authorities. Examples of projects in the Mid-Scotland and Fife region include evidencing the social impact of libraries in Stirling or the Sustainable Communities project in Perth and Kinross.
Ros McCall.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Library closures such as those proposed in Perth and Kinross are a direct consequence of budget decisions made at Holyrood and primarily impact rural communities. These communities have already lost their banks, their post office, police stations, public toilets and other vital local services, and the loss of these libraries would be yet another significant blow to the communities they serve. Given the uplift in the Scottish Government's budget, will the Cabinet Secretary commit to making more resources available to local authorities to retain these rural community assets?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think as Ros McCall knows, I used to represent a rural constituency, so I very much understand the point she's making about local services and the hubs of communities' role that libraries serve in many rural areas is changing, is developing and is hugely important. So I watch with great concern wherever there are local authority decisions in relation to library closures. She obviously feels very strongly about this. No doubt she will then have taken part in the consultation that was conducted by Perth and Kinross Council. If she'd be happy to share that with me, I would look very closely at it. And in terms of the budget process, I'm delighted that she's looking for a rise in provision for culture and the arts in Scotland. And I look forward to her voting for the SNP budget in due course.
Supplementary, Mark Ruskell.
It's quite clear that libraries are about so much more than borrowing books. I met with the community in Scone on Saturday. Really moving testimony from local people who will be impacted by these closures. It's quite clear that that closure would result in young people with additional support needs, vulnerable families, older people with dementia, all losing services, Cabinet Secretary, in their community. So can I ask him, what further support can the government give to support councils that are struggling with financial decisions? And could part of the mix here be a tourism levy to actually support culture and to support library facilities across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I respectfully and generously accept the point that has been made across the chamber now about the importance of the library. I think there is cross-party agreement here that it is so. The point that he makes about the provision of services through local libraries to communities is one that I discussed with the Scottish Library and Information Council only last week. So I'm very up to speed on the case that they're making for the protecting of the provision of local libraries. Yes, it is the case that the provision of funding is something which will determine the future of these local libraries. The Scottish Government is very committed to the preservation of these services, but the decision is, at the end of the day, for local councils to take. I will add my voice to the call of colleagues from across parties for the maintenance of library services, and we will do as much as we can through the Scottish Library and Information Council, the Public Library Improvement Fund and the provision of funding for local government to make sure that that is the case.
Thank you. And brief supplementary, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm aware that in Edinburgh and Perth they have dog-friendly library days to help increase footfall without the need for extra money. Is that something the Cabinet Secretary would recognise as something in the diversification could be done?
Cabinet Secretary, briefly.
Well, I should declare an interest as the owner of 3 dogs. Were it to be the case that I could take my dogs to the library, I'm sure it would make any visit all the more welcome. I think libraries and library managers right across Scotland are trying to look at new ways in which libraries can be open, welcoming and providing, in addition to the fantastic provision of books, but also online support, and I think being imaginative about how one can provide those services which are required by communities, families and individuals in 2024 is going to be the best way to assure the provision of library services across the country.
Question 2, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure that young people across Scotland have access to facilities that can support their involvement in arts and culture.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government's long-standing... Sorry, I should begin by thanking Brian Whittle for his question. The Scottish Government's long-standing investment in the Youth Music Initiative helps young people throughout Scotland access music-making opportunities. In 2021-22, this funding reached over 360,000 children and young people across all of Scotland's local authority areas. We provide Creative Scotland with £500,000 annually to administer the Youth Arts Open Fund. In 23-24, the fund supported 73 community-focused projects across 27 local authority areas, delivering to over 6,000 children and young people. The Scottish Government has provided funding to Systema Scotland since 2012 to deliver their Big Noise projects, which offer children and young people access to music making as well.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. I'm sure he'll agree with me that involvement in activities such as the arts and culture can have such a positive influence on young minds that will go a long way with them through their life. But the truth is that whether in schools or in our communities, access to these outlets are in sharp decline. And these cuts will be picked up in other portfolios, like in the health and education budgets. So I ask what the Cabinet Secretary will do to reverse this decline.
Cabinet Secretary.
I don't recognise the decline that has been outlined, but a concern it would be one that I would share if there were to be any reduction in the provision of music tuition and the access to musical instruments. If Brian Whittle is aware of examples of that taking place, I would be very keen to hear from him. I benefited from an education which included music provision at Broughton High School, which stood me in good stead and all of my peers, and I think it's important that children of all backgrounds have the opportunity to learn music. So I give that offer to Brian Whittle, and I look at what he forwards to me with great attention.
And brief supplementary, George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It was disappointing to see Labour make a cut to UK Department for Culture, Media and Sport revenue budget. Considering that towns like Paisley are looking at cultural activities as a regeneration tool, is he disappointed about this, and can the Cabinet Secretary show the contrasting approach taken by the Scottish Government to support people's involvement in arts and culture?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank George Adam for his question, which is correct. The UK Government has cut revenue funding to the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which is responsible for culture and the arts in England. Scottish ministers, in contrast, have increased culture sector funding this financial year as a first step to achieving the First Minister's commitment to invest at least £100 million more annually in culture and the arts by 28-29. This means that programmes like YMI, Systema Scotland, the Youth Arts Open Fund, which I've just spoken about, are able to operate and ensure that Scotland's young people have access to the arts and culture, and details of the 25-26 budget will be published later this year.
Thank you. Question 3 is not lodged. Question 4, Maggie Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what conversations it has had with its international development partners regarding building resilience to increasing humanitarian crises.
Cabinet Secretary.
For her question, our Humanitarian Emergency Fund is activated on the advice of a panel of 8 non-government organisations, and through this mechanism and in collaboration with their partners in country, expert guidance is provided on how best to respond to communities in urgent need. This includes building resilience against future humanitarian crises. We'll continue to seek the views of the sector in how we can improve the responsiveness and the resilience of the fund through the upcoming HEF review, which is due to begin in early 2025.
Maggie Chapman.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. At a time when climate impacts, both rapid and slow, increasing global inequality and horrific violence are combining to produce unprecedented humanitarian crises, the compassionate solidarity of Scotland's civil society is more vital than ever before. The Dundee International Women's Centre does phenomenal work supporting people who have made their way to Scotland from places bearing the heaviest of burdens of these crises, including Yemen and Palestine. Can the Cabinet Secretary outline how the Scottish Government is supporting organisations like DIWC who carry out life-saving work in difficult circumstances beyond the conversations he's having with external partners?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the 8 leading humanitarian organisations based in Scotland that form part of the Humanitarian Fund panel are the British Red Cross, Christian Aid, Islamic Relief, Mercy Corps, Oxfam, Skiaf, Tear Fund and Save the Children. But it's excellent to hear about the work that is happening elsewhere and on the ground and in different communities. If Maggie Chapman wishes to raise any specific elements of the work that is being delivered on the ground, the important work that the organisation that she mentions, to highlight their good efforts, I would look very closely at that.
Thank you. Question 5 is not lodged. Question 6, Michelle Thompson.
To ask the Scottish Government what it anticipates the impact of the recent UK budget will be on funding for Creative Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
The additional funding announced in the UK Autumn Statement is welcome, and as well as the savings announced in the Fiscal Statement on the 3rd of September will support the costs of pay deals and other pressures. However, this budget still leaves us facing significant cost pressures going forward. We're now considering the full implications of the UK budget. I appreciate that the culture sector needs certainty regarding future funding in order to fulfil its potential, and I look forward to providing that certainty when the Scottish Government budget is published on the 4th of December.
Michelle Thompson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Now, Creative Scotland supports small businesses across the arts sector, and they're often considered simply artists and individuals, but they are in fact small businesses. With the UK Government's decision to increase national insurance contributions for employers, is the Scottish Government concerned that the funds dedicated to supporting Scotland's arts and culture will now not go as far in seeing these businesses grow and to promote the arts sector as was previously the case?
Cabinet Secretary.
Michelle Thompson makes an important point, and the Scottish Government is considering the implications of the actions announced by the UK Chancellor on the 30th of October for our public finances and the culture sector. And despite the challenging budget situation, the Scottish Government remains committed to the £100 million additional funding by 28-29. We're already increasing funding to the culture sector by £15.8 million this financial year to £196.6 million. In 25-26, we aim to provide additional funding to the culture sector, and in line with normal budgetary procedure, the Scottish Government will publish a draft budget for 25-26 on the 4th of December, and I would invite members right across the chamber to support culture by voting for that budget.
Thank you. I've got a number of supplementaries. They will need to be brief, as will the responses. First, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Culture funding has been subjected to repeated in-year cuts and U-turns over the last 2 years. What assurances can the Cabinet Secretary give to the culture sector that they will not be placed in a precarious position due to last-minute cuts in this financial year?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the first thing I would say to Alexander Stewart is that I already answered the point in my previous question, which was that we are increasing spending this year for culture and the arts towards the £100 million annual increase that the Scottish Government is committed to. I'm making the case vigorously within Government that we should do that as quickly as possible. And if Mr Stewart and his colleagues want to support that increase in culture funding as much as I do, then they will join me in voting for the budget after it is shared with Parliament at the beginning of December.
And Neil Bibby.
Thank you, President Officer. I know panto season is coming up, but people don't want to hear continuing excuses from the Cabinet Secretary who has overseen a crisis in Scotland's culture sector. The facts are the Scottish budget is going up by £1.5 billion this year and £3.4 billion next year, thanks to the UK Labour Government's budget decisions. There is now no good reason why the Scottish Government cannot give certainty to the culture sector and meet its commitment to deliver at least £25 million extra next year, and also give councils a fair deal so they can protect local cultural provision. So given this, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, will he make a cast-iron guarantee today to fulfil his already stated promises, or will that uncertainty to the sector continue?
Cabinet Secretary.
So panto season would be making budgetary announcements before the budget, as Mr Bibby well knows. This government is already raising culture spending when his government in the UK is cutting it. And I stand on the record of this government increasing spending while his government is decreasing revenue spending. The revenue budget of the Department of Culture, Media and Sport is going down. I look forward to Labour members listening intently to the budget at the beginning of December, where I'm confident that we'll continue to raise culture spending in Scotland while his party in government in England is cutting it.
And briefly, Ash Regan.
Given the controversy surrounding Creative Scotland's funding of the Explicit Rain project, what assurances can the Scottish Government provide to the public that substantive measures have now been taken to address governance failures in this public funding model of allocation and oversight? And can the Cabinet Secretary confirm if this is direct or whether this is via the charity Inspiring Scotland? Cabinet Secretary.
I'll have to write to Ash Regan about the second part of her question, but in answering the first part, Creative Scotland senior managers gave detailed evidence to the Culture Committee about governance procedures in relation to the case that she has raised. I would invite her, I know she's not a member of that committee, but I would invite her to look closely at that evidence. I've looked closely at the assurances that they have given. It matters to me, and I'm sure it matters to her. This is particularly important because we look forward next year to the rolling out of multi-annual year funding across the culture sector, which will be a step change in supporting culture and the arts. But she's right to highlight the fact that it's important that we have governance procedures that are fit for purpose. Creative Scotland have given both myself and the relevant committee in the Scottish Parliament those guarantees.
Question 7, James Dornham, who joins us remotely.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its funding for humanitarian assistance in Gaza.
Cabinet Secretary.
If you will give me a moment, yes. In answer to James Dornan's question, the deteriorating situation in the Middle East, the Scottish Government has committed £250,000 for Gaza from our Humanitarian Emergency Fund, which includes £200,000 to the Disasters Emergency Committee's humanitarian appeal. This money will provide food, water, medical assistance and shelter to displaced people in the region. As the crisis in Gaza enters its second year and hostilities spread into Lebanon, the Scottish Government reiterates calls for a ceasefire, the immediate provision of humanitarian aid and progress towards a two-state solution where all people in the Middle East can live in peace and security.
James Dornan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Scotland's played a vital part in trying to provide aid to the people of Palestine caught in Israel's genocidal actions, and any further aid that we can provide to Gaza would be very welcome in an effort to mitigate the effects of this deliberate ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell the Parliament what steps they've taken to encourage governments, including both the UK and Israeli governments, towards ensuring a speedy ceasefire and that aid reaches the beleaguered people of Gaza?
Cabinet Secretary.
Scottish Government ministers have repeatedly called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire by all sides and unimpeded humanitarian access. We've demanded the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. We wrote to the UK Government asking them to ensure that all potential breaches of international law are investigated and that Israeli and Hamas leaders are held accountable. We've called for an end to UK arms sales to Israel and for the UK Government to recognise a sovereign Palestinian state as part of a two-state solution to secure lasting peace in the region.
And a supplementary, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The new UK Government reinstated funding for the United Nations Relief and Works agencies in July. Now, the Israeli parliaments have voted to ban them from operating within Israel. This decision means less life-saving and aid getting into Palestine. When the Cabinet Secretary met with the Deputy Ambassador of Israel, did he raise the importance of UNRWA, and will he join me in condemning the Israeli Parliament's decision?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do join Faisal Chowdhury in condemning the decision. The role of the United Nations Relief Works Agency for Palestine, which I had the honour of covering when it was headquartered in Vienna, is one that is absolutely critical to the provision of humanitarian supplies to people in Gaza. I would call on the Israeli government to revisit the decision that has been taken. We need to support the United Nations. We need to support the provision of humanitarian assistance. And if Faisal Chowdhury thinks that anything more needs to be done to persuade the UK government to make this case at the United Nations, I would be happy to join him in doing so.
Question 8, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, in light of the UK Government announcing the largest funding settlement in real terms since devolution, how will it use any increase in funding to ensure that Glasgow's arts and culture sector is able to thrive?
Cabinet Secretary.
Details of the 25-26 budget will be published later this year. However, Scottish ministers have already increased culture sector funding this financial year as the first step to achieving the First Minister's commitment to invest at least £100 million more annually in culture and the arts by 28-29. The Scottish Government wants to ensure that the public money that is invested in the arts and culture benefits those right across Scotland, and as part of this continues to provide support to Glasgow's arts and culture sector.
Paul Sweeney.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. As he will be aware, the last couple of years have been very hard for Glasgow's arts and culture sector. Funding cuts to Creative Scotland, as well as, of course, the inflationary impacts of the pandemic and war in Ukraine and so on, have led to some of Glasgow's iconic cultural institutions being pushed to the brink. And certainly local authorities have also been facing that pressure and have taken steps to raise extra revenue, such as removing the rates relief on empty listed buildings. But this has had an unintended consequence, for example, in the situation of Govanhill Baths Community Trust, which has already raised nearly £10 million to restore the historic building in Govanhill. They have now faced a £6.5 million shortfall, are unable to use the building that's in the midst of restoration, but are now facing a rates bill from Glasgow City Council, which threatens the viability of that restoration project. Would the Cabinet Secretary undertake to engage with COSLA and local authorities to see if there can be an amelioration or a mitigation on the rates burdens faced by not-for-profits trying to restore listed buildings when they're trying to do it and not be undermined by rates burdens? Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, firstly, can I say I very much agree with him about the importance of the provision of culture and arts in Glasgow. This was a subject of discussion that I had with Glasgow Life a number of months ago. But he's also right to raise community-based projects. I would be grateful if he could forward on the details of the situation that he's outlined, and I will look at any way in which I can use my good offices to support local community arts projects as he has raised this afternoon.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on constitutional, external affairs and culture and parliamentary business. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow front benches to change.
The next portfolio is Justice and Home Affairs. Again, if a member wishes to request a supplementary question, they should press their Request to Speak button during the relevant question. And at question number 1, I call Gordon MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government what action Police Scotland can take to ensure the safe and legal use of e-bikes and e-scooters.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government recognises the harm endured by communities caused by dangerous and antisocial vehicle nuisance. Use of the e-scooter on public roads, footpaths and cycle lanes is illegal, and likewise for e-bikes that exceed permitted criteria. Police Scotland, in partnership with local authorities, has a critical role in ensuring safe roads through various activities. Enforcement of all traffic offences is for Police Scotland, which operates independently of ministers. We support Police Scotland in tackling misuse of such vehicles and ensuring safety where legal use is permitted. Local policing teams identify misuse of vehicles and ensure areas are prioritised for action. Police Scotland, including local policing divisions, raise awareness of the dangers of misuse and promote safety.
Gordon MacDonald.
I thank the Minister for that answer. I've been approached by a number of constituents raising their concerns regarding e-bike and e-scooter use on roads and pavements across the constituency, which is often linked to antisocial behaviour. Minister, we need to know that the legislation covering the registration of these vehicles is reserved to the UK Government. However, can the Minister outline what, if any, discussions have taken place with the UK Government regarding the surge in their illegal use and how best to tackle this, such as introducing tighter legislation on ownership and registration?
Minister.
Thank you. We are aware that the Home Office has said that it is not planning to introduce a registration scheme or other new requirements concerning ownership, but will be looking at other proactive approaches such as increased powers to seize vehicles, which we already have as an option. We regularly engage with the UK Government, including sharing best practice. For instance, the Crime and Policing Minister, Dame Diana Jack-Johnson, spoke to the UK Tackling Antisocial Behaviour Conference in October on developing technology to safely stop e-scooters and e-bikes and enhance the ability for the police to prevent them from being used to commit criminal acts. We aim to be involved with any ongoing work or proposals that they have, especially where improvements can be made in Scotland.
Graham Simpson.
Thank you. As the Minister says, the use of e-scooters is illegal, but they are being sold here and they are being used here in quite big numbers in some parts of the country. The Minister will be aware that there have been some trials in parts of England. I think the nearest one to Scotland is Newcastle. Would you be minded to consider trialling a scheme somewhere in Scotland?
Minister.
Thank you. I'm specifically not aware of the scheme that Mr Simpson refers to, but I'm happy if you write to me further about that. Between the off vehicles, it's between Mr Fairley and myself's portfolios, but we are happy to look at anything that makes things better. Thank you.
Question number 2, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service in relation to its handling of malicious and vexatious criminal complaints.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has had no discussions with the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service on these matters. The handling of malicious and vexatious criminal complaints is an independent prosecutorial matter for the Crown Office and the Lord Advocate.
Murdo Fraser.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response? I do, of course, recognise the operational independence of the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, but as we saw in the case of the Rangers Football Club prosecutions, errors made can come at a high cost to the taxpayer, in that case already nearly £60 million. Last year, my constituent Dame Anne Gloag and 3 members of her family were charged with human trafficking offences following malicious and vexatious complaints against them. These allegations had a devastating effect on Dame Anne, 81 years old, and not just a leading business figure, but someone renowned for her philanthropy and her charitable work both here and overseas. Now, nearly 2 years later, she and her family members have been told there will be no proceedings, but that does not make up for what she describes and her family describe as a Kafkaesque nightmare, an enormous damage done to her personal reputation. So surely the Cabinet Secretary would agree with me that there is something far wrong with a system that allows innocent people to be treated in this way.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, if I can say to Mr Fraser that there can be no acceptance within the criminal justice system of complaints which are made with the intent of harming a person who has done nothing wrong. That, of course, is a burden to the person subjected to them and, of course, to the justice system. I'm grateful that he appreciates that I can't get into the specifics on any case of this nature. I would encourage him to use his offices as an MSP in terms of representing a constituent to engage with the Crown Office or indeed other players in the justice system as he sees appropriate. And in terms of the issues of the financial costs of other matters that Mr Fraser mentioned, as the Crown Office have indicated, incurring this expenditure at any time, but especially given the pressures on public finances, is highly and deeply regrettable.
Question number 3, John Mason.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to address unnecessary court citations for police officers, in light of reports that over 500 officers are summoned to court each day, with only 10% required to give evidence, leading to an estimated £22.5 million per annum in lost productivity for Police Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the citation of witnesses is a matter for the Independent Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. The Scottish Government is, however, supporting justice partners to drive reforms to improve our criminal justice system, to make it more efficient and to work better for everyone. This will include reducing the number of police witnesses required to attend court, reducing the length of time cases take, and for more cases to be concluded earlier, as well as fewer victims and civil witnesses needing to come to court. Two key programmes are summary case management, which provides a new approach to summary criminal cases, and digital evidence sharing capability, which allows digital evidence to be shared at the earliest opportunity.
John Mason.
Well, I do thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, which I find quite encouraging. And I just wonder if she would agree that it's not just how many police we have in this country, but it's actually how we use them that matters. The Finance Committee is constantly hearing about how we need to increase productivity in Scotland across the board. And it does seem to me, and I hope she would agree, that the courts need to also update their procedures and improve productivity.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, Presiding Officer, I agree with the point that the member makes about how we use our resources. That matters in terms of deployment of personnel, frontline resources, as well as our finances. I hope he can be reassured that the summary case management pilot, which is judicially led, and its recent evaluation report demonstrated really positive benefits. So, for example, an estimated 18,000 witnesses not cited or recited due to summary case management. A proportion of these 11,000 were police witnesses who were not required. And if this pilot was in place at a national level, that would mean that nearly 90,000 witnesses, 50,000 of them police officers, would not require to be cited to court. So there is wide support for summary case management, and the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service have said that the ambition is to roll this out as soon as possible. But this, of course, is subject to agreement and will be determined by the project team, which is judicially led.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Needless appearances at court aren't just inefficient, they put a real strain on police officers, with many being forced to return from holiday or abandon rest days, often just to be told the case isn't going ahead. And while the current pilot scheme has been welcomed by many, Police Scotland want further improvements, and the Scottish Police Federation described the changes as a drop in the ocean. Can the Cabinet Secretary offer assurances to officers that this model will be widened and improved so that they are less likely to face disruption in the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we all want to see further improvements for many of the reasons outlined by Ms Dowie. I hope she can be reassured that, for example, the digital evidence sharing capability scheme will be rolled out. That was announced during the summer. That is a world-leading project that has benefited from £33 million of Scottish Government investment. That will roll out between the summer gone by and next autumn. The rollout of DESC in many ways is a precursor that will help to enable the rollout of the summary case management, which will have huge benefits for both civil and professional witnesses.
Question number 4, Jamie Halcrow-Johnston.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the impact of the reduction in police numbers since 2010 on Police Scotland's ability to respond to all incidents of crime, including antisocial behaviour, within its responsibilities.
Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Scottish policing has been completely transformed since the formation of Police Scotland, with a more strategic and consistent approach to policing across the country. Scotland continues to be a safe place to live, with recorded crime down 40% since 2006-07. We have increased police funding year on year since 2016-17, investing more than £13.2 billion since the establishment of the force. The Chief Constable confirmed that Police Scotland would reach 16,600 police officers last week, and Police Scotland is currently undertaking the largest recruitment of officers throughout 2024-25 since its establishment in 2013, and has already recruited more than 940 officers since March.
Jamie Halcrow-Johnston.
In many of the rural and island communities across my Highlands and Islands region, there is a concern that reduced police numbers mean more low-level crimes or incidents of antisocial behaviour aren't being investigated, and as a result, some individuals are less likely to report incidents. Despite the best efforts of officers, many of my constituents living in the more remote communities feel further away from policing cover than ever. What concerns does the Cabinet Secretary have of the number of crimes and incidents of antisocial behaviour simply not being reported across rural Scotland? And what would she say to my constituents over what they believe is a reduced police presence in their communities?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I hope the member can be reassured by the recently published revised model for policing, which has a very specific and central focus on the importance of frontline policing. The Chief Constable and others are on record as saying that they want to see frontline policing be at its strongest possible footing, and that of course applies to our rural areas as well as our city areas. In terms of antisocial behaviour, I think the very strong message that all members in this chamber should be given to their communities is to report it. Of course, some antisocial behaviour is criminal. Other antisocial behaviour is not criminal, and that's why the partnerships between local authorities and Police Scotland are so important, and it's why those local policing plans remain so important as well.
Brief supplementary, Ben McPherson.
I know the Cabinet Secretary is aware of both how significantly Edinburgh's population is growing and also the serious issues there have been this year in my constituency and the capital more widely regarding a small minority of youths engaging in very concerning antisocial behaviour and theft and violence as well. Therefore, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary for the Scottish Government's response to these concerning trends and the pressures in Edinburgh?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we all take very seriously the impact that antisocial behaviour and crime has. Everyone has the right to be safe and to feel safe in their community. Under the antisocial behaviour legislation, every local authority and police partner must prepare, publish and review a strategy periodically for preventing and tackling antisocial behaviour in their local authority area, and therefore building safer communities. The member will be aware that decisions on how to deploy resources are, of course, for the Chief Constable, but I can confirm that of 30th September E-Division, which is Edinburgh, has 1,103 officers deployed across the city, and it is important to recognise, in addition, all divisions can call upon resources out with their core officer base should it be required.
Brief supplementary, Douglas Ross.
I'm going to try again this week to get a straight answer from the Cabinet Secretary. Are the Scottish Government figures correct to say that crime has increased by 4%, or is John Swinney correct to say that crime is at 40-year lows?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, having looked at the record in terms of the specifics of the First Minister, I think he was correct, but the statistics are also correct as well. As I often say to members, it is important to look at the year-on-year changes, and some of those year-on-year changes are going in the wrong direction. But the facts of the matter remain: this country remains a safer place under the SNP.
Thank you. Move to question number 5, and I call Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to ensure appropriate oversight of the police use of facial recognition technology.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we are committed to the legal, ethical and proportionate use of new technologies in policing, which take account of ethical and human rights obligations and secure public confidence. Any decision to deploy facial recognition technology is an operational matter for the Chief Constable under the scrutiny of the Scottish Police Authority. I wrote to the authority seeking assurances that a transparent and robust process will be adopted in considering and scrutinising any plans for the future deployment of this technology. The authority has confirmed its joint commitment with Police Scotland to taking forward a broad and transparent public discussion at the earliest opportunity to better inform the decision-making on future deployment.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. I thank the Cabinet Secretary. In 2018, the so-called cyber kiosk technology was introduced by Police Scotland on an ambiguous legal basis and with limited prior engagement or consultation. An independent review in 2023 said, quote, lessons would be learned and any new technologies would be fully compliant with human rights. Yet, while the Cabinet Secretary is correct in saying oversight of operational matters is, of course, for the Scottish Police Authority, given the evidence and the legal challenges in England and Wales pointing to the risks of live facial recognition technology misidentifying, particularly those from ethnic minorities, what specific steps can the Government take to ensure any decision to roll out live tracking of citizens is properly regulated and managed?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I appreciate the members' long-standing interest in this matter. It is imperative that any lessons from the past are learned, and indeed any lessons across the UK and beyond. I do recognise the member's in-depth interest in this, bearing in mind he recently lodged 37 written PQs on this very matter. The safeguards, as he will know, relate to data protection, they relate to ECHR, and also I know he's very familiar with the role of the Biometrics Commissioner, because I think he was perhaps had a role to play in the establishment of the Biometrics Commissioner role. There is a statutory code of practice which is based on human rights and that any practice has to be non-discriminatory. And anything that I can do with members or indeed other partners to ensure that we have a proper, well-informed debate on this, I'm very open to.
Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if the use of this technology has a place in being able to combat crime as long as it's used properly and has the oversight that was noted in the Cabinet Secretary's previous answer?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I very much agree with that balanced view presented by Ms Nicholl. We have to recognise that technological advances can bring benefits to the police and indeed other justice agencies in detecting, preventing and prosecuting crime. It is important that Police Scotland officers are provided with technology to keep our community safe, whilst ensuring that technology is robust, fit for purpose and non-discriminatory. And I note that the Chief Constable confirmed to the Criminal Justice Committee on the 30th of October that she is closely following the lessons learned from how technology is being used by police forces elsewhere in the United Kingdom. And the Scottish Police Authority have also confirmed to me the importance of the proportionality principle, which is human rights, and the requirement to strike a balance between the privacy of individuals and the safety of our communities.
Question number 6, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its work to reform the Victims Notification Scheme in the coming year to ensure that it operates in a more trauma-informed way.
Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As outlined in our response, we accepted the majority of the recommendations of the independent review of the Victim Notification Scheme, including the central proposal of creating a victim contact team to provide personalised trauma-informed support. This will be based on the individual needs of victims, who will automatically be referred to the team for a discussion about their options and for an explanation of their rights. We are taking the opportunity of the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill, currently before Parliament, to prioritise the changes needed to primary legislation. We will work with justice partners and victim support organisations over the coming months to deliver the reforms to ensure that it operates in a more trauma-informed way.
David Torrance.
The independent review of the Victims Notification Scheme heard directly from victims and their families about their experience of the justice system and the Victim Notification Scheme. Does the Minister share my gratitude for her participation and strength, and does she agree that we must continue to listen to her voices as we progress these reforms?
Minister.
Thank you. I also extend, Presiding Officer, my thanks to the victims and their families who contributed to their experiences of the justice system in the review. We know from the report that this engagement came at a personal cost, and I would reiterate my wholehearted respect and admiration for the courage of people who came forward to talk about their personal experience. We absolutely must listen to the voices of victims and their families as we progress the reforms to the scheme. This is vital in taking a victim-centred and trauma-informed approach to the changes that we need in the Victim Notification Scheme. So we will engage with victim support organisations and our justice partners, and also through Victims Task Force and other means to collaborate appropriately for victims.
Thank you. And I call Katie Clark.
In September, it was reported that after the release of 477 prisoners under the emergency release scheme, a mere 1% of victims were notified. Given the Cabinet Secretary's statement that emergency release may need to be used again, and indeed the upcoming legislation which proposes to release more prisoners earlier in the sentence, what is the Minister doing to ensure that as many victims of crime as possible are properly supported and are notified if the Scottish Government proceeds with more releases?
Mr.
Thank you. Should the proposed changes be agreed by the Parliament in due course, we will continue that engagement. But if I could just give a bit of history to the early release in the summer. Out of only 11 of the 700 prisoners that were considered for the emergency release scheme, they had a registered interest in the Victim Notification Scheme. And I think this reflects the kind of offender groups that were automatically extended, such as the prisoners serving longer sentences and offenders. And I know that the CAB Secretary ensured out of those 11 cases, there was only 6 prisoners were permitted early release. But as part of that scheme, the Cabinet Secretary also made sure that as part of the preparations of the recent emergency release, there were 2 new ways for victims to receive information that were added. Victims were able to go through one of the 4 victim support organisations, and alternatively, a victim was able to contact the SBS directly to receive information on any potential release. So we learned from lessons from that, and we will continue that moving forward.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On the contact centre that's been set up to manage victims signing up to the Victim Notification Scheme, precisely how much money has been allocated to that? And can the Minister confirm that this is new money which will not come from funds from victim support organisations or other third sector partners?
Minister.
I do not have those exact figures here, but I will write to the member with those details.
Question number 7, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Justice Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues regarding police action to tackle raptor persecution in light of reports of a dead golden eagle being found recently in the Stirling constituency.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, wildlife crime and the persecution of raptors is unacceptable. While I am aware of the case the member references, it would of course be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing investigation. Wildlife crime is a matter for the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity, and I know he will be following the case closely. The Scottish Government has taken action to tackle wildlife crime in recent years through increased penalties for the most serious offences and a new licensing scheme for grouse shooting. I would encourage anyone with information relating to any wildlife crime to report it to Police Scotland.
Evelyn Tweed.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. This was clearly a wildlife crime, given the terrible condition in which the golden eagle was found. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to ensure the public are aware of what constitutes a wildlife crime and what steps they can take to report dead or injured raptors.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government works with a number of partners, including Police Scotland, land managers and conservation groups, to raise awareness of and take steps to tackle wildlife crime. This is predominantly done through the Partnership for Action Against Wildlife Crime in Scotland. The partnership attended the Royal Highland Show and the Scottish Game Fair in summer of this year, where partnership members raised awareness and provided education on how to spot and report wildlife crime. And Police Scotland also have a number of dedicated wildlife crime officers located across Scotland who work closely with the National Wildlife Crime Unit on projects to prevent and detect wildlife crime, which regularly include public engagement.
And a brief supplementary, Mark Ruskell.
It's becoming clear that the way land is defined through the Wildlife Management and Muirburn Act has severely compromised the most important legal deterrent to wildlife crime that we have. So will the Cabinet Secretary discuss this issue with other Cabinet colleagues with a view to bringing forward an amendment to the Land Reform Bill to close the vast loophole that now exists? The illegal persecution of birds of prey clearly must end.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I will ask Ministers and the Cabinet Secretary responsible for issues in and around land reform to engage directly with the member.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions. I'll allow a moment or two for front benches to organise for the next item of business.